Death is the only universal truth. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for just a matter of a few seconds. And as you close your eyes, I want you to connect with the breath that's incoming and the breath that's outgoing. That happens involuntarily. Could you imagine if we were responsible for our incoming and outgoing breath and we forgot? I also want you in this moment to recognize that as you take your incoming breath, there is a possibility the outgoing breath will not occur. As your outgoing breath happens, I want you to think about there's a possibility the incoming breath will not occur. So with that, I'll invite you to open your eyes again. A few years back, about 7 or 8 years ago, I was in a really miserable place. Everything sucked externally to me, but me. My career sucked, my relationship sucked, and everybody else was to blame but me. I started this journey called the Hero's Journey. Quite a fascinating journey. Each and every one of us go through this calling of there's got to be something better out there. This is not it. I feel an emptiness in my heart and there's something out there that's going to fill it. And I started to look for what that was. Conferences, workshops, traveled around the world to ashrams. Everywhere somebody told me the answer might be, that's where I was. And as this hero's journey began, I started to realize that, wait a minute, and I don't know how many of you know about the hero's journey, but there's a place at which there's a calling in your life and you want to do something different. You may not want to know what it is. And then you go down this slippery slope of all of the challenges and obstacles that are going to happen. So what did I do? Left my job, left my marriage, left everything, moved across the ocean to the island because I thought that's where the answer was. Because I needed to drop everything. So as I went down this hero's journey, there's a pit in this hero's journey. And when you're sitting in that caca, yucky place of, oh my gosh, what have I done? Maybe I should have stayed in that relationship. Maybe I should have stayed working there. All of the shoulds, the coulds, the woulds start popping up in that pit of despair on that hero's journey. So that's what happened with me. I started to question all the choices that I had made. All the choices I had made against culture, society, religion, all of that. I had broken so many norms that in the pit of despair, I was like, I've done massively wrong things here. The beauty of the hero's journey is that at some point, your social allies start to change, so you start to recognize that maybe the choices I've made are the right ones for me. And that's what happened. My social allies started to change. More and more beautiful people came into my life as I started to look for what was within me. The beauty of stepping outside the hero's journey is you come out with this beautiful elixir. And that elixir is what's true to you and what's true to your heart. It's almost like a medication you carry out of this hero's journey. And I could stand here and I could tell you stories and stories about this hero's journey. Everything that I thought were miserable things that were happening in my life, and yet they weren't. My grandfather was an amazing storyteller. And one of the stories he used to tell when we were little was that each and every individual person is like a vehicle. And your body in this vehicle goes down the road. And as you journey down this road, you're going to come across hospitals and cemeteries and storms and parks. And at that time, I was, oh my God, he's annoying us again. Here goes another story. Because that's where they were. He taught within those stories. It wasn't until I started to walk that hero's journey that I started to recognize that I was searching for happiness. And I had to take a step back and think, wow, this is a part of the journey that my grandfather talked about. Happiness is only one part of that journey. I have to learn to exist within that pathway in that journey, where happiness will come, sadness will come, death will occur, birth will occur. There's so many things that occur as you travel down that pathway. So here's the elixir that I ended up walking out with. The elixir was that my physical body has an expiry date that's invisible, that's stamped on. And that invisible expiry date is totally connected to my incoming and my outgoing breath. That there's a possibility, like seriously, the magnitude of understanding just that one thing, that next breath, incoming or outgoing, is not a given for you. It's not a given for me. So how was I going to choose to live, recognizing that expiry date, that invisible expiry date existed on my physical body? And that shifted the way I looked at relationships. It shifted the way, horrible things were happening in my life, good things were happening. There was almost a neutrality, like a neutral being within that place. Things would happen, I would still get sad, I would still get angry, I would still get happy, but it wouldn't last because I knew as that vehicle continued down that road, things were going to shift. What was true today was not going to be true tomorrow. As long as I kept that invisible expiry date that stamped onto my body forefront, I could recognize the choices and decisions I was making in my life. And none of them were right or wrong. They just were. So I would process things from the past, like things would come up from boarding school, things would come up from the divorce, things would come up from an arranged marriage. But all of a sudden it was a different view of how I looked at them. They were experiences that happened in that moment. And if I chose to sit there in that memory bank, I was going to cry, I was going to get upset, I was going to get angry, and all of those emotions that actually don't even exist in the reality of that moment were going to come up. I'm not in boarding school anymore. I'm not going through my divorce anymore. I'm not in my arranged marriage. Yet, in that moment in time, how many years later, I was still reliving all of those. So when you keep that breath in mind, when you keep that expiry date in mind, it shifts the way you view the world. I think as human beings, we're so busy thinking about transcending and ascending and connection to divine. All of them very beautiful things. But I think we're forgetting physical existence. Like, how do we exist as human beings? The other day I looked up the definition of humanity because I was quite intrigued. And the definition of humanity is a collective of humans. Is that it? Like seriously, is that all we can get from a dictionary, is the collection of humans? So when I step back and I look at life differently, I'm looking at it from a physical existence. I'm done transcending and ascending and connecting to divine. I'm done. Now I want to know, how am I going to live here? Because what I've learned is that if divine was so set on me learning transcendence and ascension and all of that beautiful stuff, why would I be here? So here we are, and I'm in the place of now inviting everybody that physical existence is where I'm at. The elixir that I came out with, which is my invisible expiry date, that expiry date now fuels my physical existence. So as of January 1st, I've disconnected from all social media because I want to experience life differently. Not that social media was bad, but now it's time to actually get out there and be in that physical existence. It's time to get on a horse. It's time to go tubing in Whistler. It's time to do all of these beautiful things that require the courage, the accountability, and all of the beautiful things that the speakers before me have said. Because I think there's a thread that ties all of us. There's a thread that says, this is not good enough. And if it's not good enough, then what kind of a life do I want to live, knowing that one day I will not be here? And how much of the population will actually even remember that we were ever here? So I'll leave you with a quote. And the quote is that either one day I will write a book, or I'm going to live a life that somebody else writes about. So I invite you today to be one or the other. Thank you.